Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Can a legitimate paranormal investigation be carried out on the air? Do weird things really happen on the set? Are progressive paranormal theories and methods finally catching on in Hollywood or wherever?
Hello and welcome to the 885th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live and on TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and those media mystic questions came from my co-host, partner in paranormal adventures, and dad, Paul. And today we bring you two distinguished guests on a familiar subject. And if you'd like to join us on the air, call us at 401-766-1240. That's from anywhere, or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com or get to us via various social media platforms.
Doug Hajicek is a wildlife researcher, technology inventor, and has had a very successful national television career spanning over 30 years. His accomplishments are also many in the scientific world. His firsts include building the camera system that filmed the first free-swimming giant squid, well over 54 feet long, living in its natural habitat. They must have been kind of tangled up. Doug was a producer for the long-running hit TV series Monster Quest for the History Channel. Before this, he produced many documentaries and other TV series for Animal Planet, Discovery Channel, Discovery Health, TLC, OLN, NBC, CBS, PBS, and what Stan Friedman would have called all those alphabet soup places. In July of last year, he co-authored a scientific paper in the Journal of Animals on the birth of black bears and their care. You're thinking of getting a black bear, Ben. I don't know. Talk to Doug first.
Hey, exotic pets. It's not a calling I feel called to.
Well, all right. Well, Doug lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Joel Sturgis has worked in radio since the age of 16, same as Ben, starting his career at a local AM radio station in the North Woods of Minnesota. He has since worked for large and successful radio networks such as Westwood One, CBS Radio, and iHeartRadio. Joel has found his broadcasting niche in the subject of high strangeness. He is also a researcher of the paranormal. Joel is equally comfortable hunting for ghosts, searching for Bigfoot, and gazing into the night sky looking for extraterrestrial life. Joel brings his passion and knowledge of the strange and unusual to Untold Radio AM.
So, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hajicek, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, thank you for having us. We're really excited.
Hey, it's great to have you guys here. So, I guess we'll just hop right into it. First of all, how did you two team up on Untold Radio, and have you worked together on paranormal cases? Doug?
Hey, I met Joel at a Bigfoot conference, and literally, I had never met Joel, never talked to Joel. We still haven't done any investigations together, but he just approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to do a radio show?" And that's what happened. And of course, I thought about it for 10 seconds, Joel?
Yeah, it was like 10 seconds.
10 seconds. I gave it a good.
You made me sweat. Just that one.
And I thought, well, it's actually kind of what I do because I love, just talking about Bigfoot and the paranormal science. And me and Joel hit it off, and I think we spent 3 days just talking and telling stories. And next thing you know, now we're doing a radio show.
Cool. Joel, what's your take on the subject? What's your side of the story?
Well, a little bit about me. I mean, as far as paranormal goes, I've been doing this since '92 in the paranormal. Really, it's a weird story to tell you guys later on about. I talked to a dead guy for 10 minutes, and we can get into that a little bit. But really, my story is I've had a fascination with the paranormal, like everybody else. Started with In Search of and sightings and that kind of stuff. I really grew up on it, and always had a deep interest in it. And then, of course, Bigfoot is my newest of the paranormal fascinations. And mainly because I had a brush with a Bigfoot. And it left me wondering what I'd seen, or what I'd dealt with. And I reached out to a well-known research team in our state. And then that brought me basically to the event where I met Doug. And so I asked him, we really hit it off, and I asked him, hey, do you do any radio? And he says, well, yeah. And I said, what would you like to do in radio? Like to host a show. And here we are. We started Untold Radio in October, and it has just been going crazy ever since. It's been one of the strangest, wildest, fun rides in radio I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, it is really amazing, and I enjoyed being on it a few months ago. It's where we got to know each other, starting to. So, before we get to listener questions, what do you feel, the two of you, is the state of, let's say, paranormal TV at this point? Now, I'll give you a little background before you answer the question. We were involved in a project for a certain channel, and all the executives thought it was great. They wanted to take our bizarre sort of, it was what we call the progressive paranormal theories and methods, and for the first time put them on TV, multiverse instead of dead people, that kind of thing. But the honcho at the channel said, wait a minute, I want my ghosts to be ghosts and my demons to be demons, and that sank the project, at least for that channel. So, is that the current state of paranormal, even reality TV? They don't want necessarily authenticity or new thought. They want same old, and people screaming and running out of houses. I mean, what's your take on that? Am I wrong?
Doug, you want to field that first?
I mean, to me, people haven't even gotten used to the paranormal, let alone combining, the paranormal, which are, really old theories, but being proven out by researchers. So, no, I really do think they're interested in just a UFO show, just a ghost show, just a Bigfoot show. But I think, it'll change like anything, because the networks are pretty flooded with these, I kind of call them copycat shows, because they're all very, very similar.
Okay. All right.
Well, I guess the argument, I suppose, would be that the formula is familiar, it's easy to catch on to. Now, if let's say that's the hypothesis, would you say that that's accurate, that the formula is kind of what makes the show?
Yeah, the formula has a lot to do with it, Ben. If you think about television, it's extremely based on formula. And this thing of combining all the different paranormal aspects would be a whole new formula that they haven't invented yet. They don't know if it would work. I think it would work fine, but it's kind of a risk. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars of an investment, and if the show fails, it leaves egg on the executive that gave it the green light.
Mm-hmm. All right, Joel, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to come at a different approach. I'm going to come more as the consumer, as the investigator. Because I don't know, like Doug, I'm not really well-versed in TV. I could tell you all day about radio and radio formula and stuff like that, but not television. Really, in my opinion, as an investigator, I don't see a ton of value in it. I mean, I understand it's for entertainment, but what they should do is put a big, for entertainment purposes only, disclaimer in front of it. Because I would say most of the new investigators post-2004 used ghost hunters as a field training guide, right? And it was never meant to be so. It was meant to be entertainment. It's supposed to be fun. So it's become its own monster of industry, where it's diluted itself to the point where it's a shell of its former self. In the early days, it was interesting, it was fun, it was something new, hadn't been done before. Now it's so glut with different shows that it's basically laughable in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it also degrades the field. I mean, you're looking at people that are screaming, yelling, going nuts, really stuff that the average respectful investigator does not do. And you have a guy going, right, scratch me, bring it, bro, and then running out of the house. So, I mean, on my end of it, as a consumer of paranormal media, I really believe it's taken a pretty far turn down as far as quality goes.
Yeah,
I guess that's fair. I had the fortune of when I was in college, I took a really interesting course on media criticism. Although it was inaccurate, like most of the classes I took, the title should have been medium criticism, as in the medium is kind of the message, right? So the sort of idea was that the medium kind of dictates how someone consumes it, right? So in this instance, we have these really, kind of sensational shows that kind of focus around the sort of like extreme experience, extreme paranormal kind of stuff, right? So, that kind of being said, do you believe that TV is just not a good medium for it? And if so, what is the best medium that you can see to kind of have a discourse about the paranormal and sort of a better way to kind of show the experience?
I think TV is a perfect medium for it. I mean, look at Leonard Nimoy with In Search Of. Look at other shows that came before them that did it very successfully and very tastefully. I think that the ramping up the shock factor and having to put as many out of these shows, because let's just face it, they're cheap to put together. They're very cheap to put together. I think it's the quality, not the medium, because I think the medium is very viable. But I think the quality of some of the programming is suffering. But medium's works very well for it. And it could, under the right circumstances, it could be a very powerful medium if they choose to maybe go in a more of a, I don't want to call it a serious direction, but more of a investigator-centric direction.
Okay. Doug, thoughts?
Well, of course, you guys are addressing pretty much ghost shows, and where my experience is in like cryptozoology, things that may not be even paranormal. We don't know. And so, to be honest, I won't even watch the ghost shows because to me they are laughable. They're not really applying anything but a lot of drama that seems kind of contrived and whatnot. But I would still love to see a show that addresses the paranormal and addresses all this using less drama, a little more science, a little drier but a little deeper. It's kind of shallow.
Okay. Doug, having mentioned the cryptid scene, I think you've made a perfect transition into our first listener question. We have a very nice listener in Bogota, Colombia, who sends in. I'm trying not to use dog-like.
I know. We're trying to fumble with the words.
Loyal or faithful. Trying to always include his excellent questions. And Ben, if you'd take it away, Peter from Bogota has a question or two.
Indeed. So Peter writes to us, first, please ask Doug and Joel if anyone has ever submitted Freedom of Information Acts or Freedom Act requests on Bigfoot or other cryptid cases, and if so, were there any results?
Sure. I mean, I can answer that. There was recently somebody did a FOIA request on Bigfoot, and all they ended up getting was the FBI testing some Bigfoot hairs. Peter Byrne, I believe, was involved in that. He was mentioned in the report, and that they had come back, bear hairs or whatever. So what came back was extremely little. I would imagine there's a ton more. I couldn't imagine there not being. But that's what came back, and someone's going to have to pursue it more. But I've never been a FOIA guy because they're just, you're never going to get anything that's just like, oh my God.
I agree.
It's not going to happen.
Yep.
If I might weigh in really quickly, every time I've done a FOIA request, it gets hit by the redaction bug pretty heavily anyway. Right. So there isn't really much substance there to really go off of.
Yeah, it's like 90% redaction, 10% content.
Yeah. Okay, and there's a second question from Peter.
Indeed, there is, and the question is, has anyone discovered a Bigfoot counterpart to Project Blue Book? Which is actually, that's kind of an interesting question. It never occurred to me before.
I mean, there's nothing like that I know of. That would be amazing if there was. But no one has ever started that. No one's ever tried to retrieve any type of files like that. And there's never been a government project, to research Bigfoot. Although I think it's needed, mainly because these reports are never going to stop coming in. Like the UFO reports, it's fueled every day. And you would think that at some point, some government agency would say, hey, this isn't going to go away. We need to address it. and maybe even debunk it, which could be their goal.
Yeah.
But they have not even addressed it.
Well, we got into some of this when I was on your show, but the fact that we were running into the military or something that seemed like the military every time we would investigate a flap case, as we call it, all sorts of seemingly unrelated paranormal phenomena, at least that were not traditionally associated with one another, taking place in close quarters in an area of perhaps even a few hundred square miles. We would always run into some sort of armed group and some sort of old farm or something that seemed to be being used as a facility of some kind, research facility of some kind, sometimes more obviously than others. And so that has led us to believe that all areas of the paranormal are subject to secrecy that is often only attributed to UFOs. What say you?
Well, I can make one comment before Joel, and that is the money that came out of the ATIP program went to Bob Bigelow, and of course I've heard rumors that most of that money was used for Skinwalker Ranch research, which would have included the paranormal, Bigfoot, ghost lights, orbs, mutilations, God knows. And so that's probably the closest that I've ever heard about government funding research. Now, whether the truth will ever come out on what that money was used for, I think we all were under the impression that money was being used to research unknown metals. But I've heard rumors that that's not the case.
Yeah, me too. Joel?
And my question, or my statement would be, how much of this research money comes from like the black stuff, where they don't tell you where the money is going outright. So, there's been a lot of government interest in UFOs. That's well documented. But it makes you wonder if the funding is happening. Is it coming from a black budget that isn't really privy to us at all? Which could absolutely be the case. The government was investigating at one point using the men at Stare Goats, and that came from a black budget. So at that point, they were deeply looking at psychic phenomena and, of course, UFO phenomena. And that's where I would suspect the funding would come from if they were doing that.
Well, also there's the notion of private funding. Eisenhower wasn't kidding when he used the term military-industrial complex. Industry has its little paws in all of this, I think, because wouldn't we love not only to weaponize the paranormal, we'd love to be able to use the principles of the multiverse, if that's what it's about, and if we're correct in that theory, to transport cargo, eliminating ships or polluting airplanes or anything of that. All these principles may be of great interest to the private sector as well. So that's just one thing to think about. Any other thoughts on that, Ben?
Well, I think it's really interesting. It's vaguely related, maybe, and it mostly has to do with missing persons reports in in national parks and places like that, and also Bigfoot sightings. There's all these very odd links to Bigfoot sightings and missing persons reports almost concurrently in national parks. Now, there's another argument that we've made with this thing called the Bouger anomaly, which essentially is, for those who've never heard us talk about it, is geographical. Basically,
geological.
Jeez. So it's a geological anomaly.
Gravity anomaly.
Right. Where, the closer to the center of the Earth you get, the lighter gravity gets, and it also has something to do with fossil fuels and all of that. But we found in places where there's, flap areas that we've been investigating over the years, the Bouger anomaly is present. And if you look at a map, and you can very easily Google any of these maps and find like geological surveys and whatnot of these areas. And interestingly enough, they happen to be where most of these missing persons reports are, and Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings, places like Mount Shasta and all sorts of areas like that. And my question is mostly, have you explored this link between Bigfoot sightings, UFO sightings, and these missing persons reports?
Well, I can take a quick stab here, Ben. I have been looking at the magnetic anomaly map, and they correlate amazingly with Bigfoot sightings.
Mm-hmm.
They also, coordinate with UFO activity. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. But I find it really, really interesting that the magnetic anomaly map that the government has put out is really an amazing match. You can almost lay it on a sighting map, and it matches really well. But on the other coin, a skeptic might say, well, the magnetic anomalies are where there's a lot of water and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, Bigfoot sightings happen, mainly near water, which is also a very interesting point, that sightings seem to happen mainly 500 yards from water. So there's just so many things that we have not explored. But the problem is, how do you connect them in a way besides just anecdotal coincidence?
Yeah,
that's true.
That's the problem. How do you prove it?
Yeah, and then what constitutes proof? Joel?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm right there with Doug. I mean, what constitutes proof? We're looking at all these different anomalies. We had a good friend of ours on the show recently, David Polites, on.
Oh, yeah.
And he, of course, missing 411.
Sure.
And we went deep. We did the deep dive into this, and people are disappearing. And there are some hints of Bigfoot activity, but there's also some hints of just gone, like blink and they're gone. One guy disappeared 300 yards from his hunting party, and they have no idea where he went, and nothing was ever found. I think the only thing they ever found was his rifle. So it's really up to speculation of what's taking these people. But one thing's for sure, there is a missing persons problem, especially in the state parks, national parks, to the point to where they're very resistant. When I say they, I mean some of the powers that be are resistant to even talk about. The Department of Interior does not want to talk about missing persons. It's very hard to get them to talk about that.
Wanted to get into your own personal paranormal experiences, but maybe we can at least take up to the break to continue talking about the disappearances. Because I find it very fascinating. I've interviewed people who, well, at least by the end of the 1970s, I was running into, the ghosts of buildings. They weren't there the next day, or people seeing ghosts of themselves, or things that seemed far more like bilocation and or something else other than dead people. So I don't know what the relationship with the disappearing people in the parks have been, but cases certainly are going up. Do you think they really are going up, or it's just the information flow on the internet where there's more information, correct or incorrect?
Well, I personally think that the information has been, not easy to get on all this. So I think we're going to see a big peak, and I think at some point it will plateau here in modern times. So I don't necessarily think it's increasing, but, in the cases, once again, of missing people in forested areas are extremely odd. The patterns are odd. Finally, some law enforcement people are, starting to talk a bit, saying, yeah, we found this guy's clothes, and it's as if they just dropped off his body, Yeah. There's starting to be just a little bit of leaks and cracks in some of the rescue people and some of the law enforcement. And, once again, it's, we're looking up a real challenge to try to get any further as to what's causing it, who's doing it, what's doing it. And most likely, in my opinion, it's a whole bunch of factors. It could be all of the above.
Yeah. Joel, any further thoughts on that?
I think we're more aware, like Doug had said. I think information is everywhere, now, not only by, officials, but the everyday citizen with the technology that's at our fingertips now. We can report things quicker, more thoroughly, or as it's happening. I don't know enough to speak to an uptick on it, but it's definitely better reported than it used to be.
Okay. All right. Well, there we are. Why don't we take our break a little early, our mid-show break. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley with our terrific guests today, Doug Hajicek and Joel Sturgis. We'll be right back to continue our conversation, so don't go anywhere.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to the Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
And welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM, 99.5 FM. And let's get back to our conversation with these greats of the media and the paranormal, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hajicek. So, well, let's get into, gentlemen, your own personal paranormal experiences, whether on set or off set or whenever they have occurred, perhaps in chronological order. Joel, you want to start?
Sure. The strangest thing that ever happened to me, I was working at a country music station, Dallas, Texas. And it was a small FM, country music, of course, being the area. And I was working night shift. And the guy every Sunday morning that would come in behind me, his name was Roy. And everyone called him Cowboy Roy because he was actually at that time, or before he started radio, a real cowboy. He'd do cattle drives from Kansas to Texas to into Mexico. I mean, he really lived a life on the trail. And his show was called On the Trail with Cowboy Roy. And he'd play the old standards, Johnny Cash, Merle Haggard, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it was a Sunday morning. It was early in spring, and I'm working, wrapping up. And about 10 minutes before his shift, every Sunday morning he'd come up. And he'd go into the break room, which was adjoining to the studio, because you'd have to walk in some stairs, get into the studio area, and then go in the break room. And every Sunday I go in there, I get my set wrapped up, I get enough songs to carry me over so he could get into his studio and get settled in. And I'd always go talk with him. Just, hey, Roy, how you doing? He always had the greatest stories about either being a cattle driver or doing this or doing that. Just a lot of fun to talk to. And that year, the Texas Rangers were doing great in baseball. He was a big baseball aficionado. And he was telling me, hey, the Rangers got a real shot. This could be great. And he's drinking a cup of coffee, and we're talking. And he crushes his cup of coffee, throws it into the wastebasket. And he says, well, I got to get on the air. Time to hit the trail. So he does that. And I said, all right, Roy, you have a good one. So I get downstairs, and I'm tired at this point. I mean, I've been up all night playing music I don't really like. And not that there's anything inherently wrong with country music. But for me, personally, it just wasn't my cup of tea. As I made it downstairs into our sales area where radio sales had happened to grab my jacket and leave, our general manager was standing there. Dennis never showed up on the weekends. Never. The place would have to be on fire for him to want to show up on the weekends. And I saw him standing there, and I said, Dennis, what brings you here? And we're talking a little bit. He says, did you hear the news? And I said, well, what news is that? I've been working all night, and so I haven't heard anything station-wise. Yeah, Roy died last night. I'm here to cover a shift. I just want to let you know that.
Wow.
He passed away, and I'm here to cover until you get a replacement. And my jaw hit the floor. I mean, I was just godsmacked, white as a ghost, pardon the pun. Mm. And I thought he was messing with me, because he was sometimes could be a trickster, Dennis could be. So, of course, I said, no, that's a horrible joke. He's upstairs, and I'll take you up there, and I'll show you. So we went upstairs, and he was gone. No Cowboy Roy.
Wow.
And Dennis looks at me, and he says, you've been working a lot of midnights. Maybe you should take a couple days off, relax, and just go home for a couple days. We have this covered. And so, but I remember going in the break room with him, and the styrofoam cup that he was drinking on was crushed and in the trash can, just like I remember.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just me imagining it, being tired or anything. It really happened. It really happened. And so we talked for about 10 minutes, me and Roy.
So would you say dead person or time slip?
I don't know. I really wish I had a better answer for it. Did he die and not realize he died and was going about his life, or what was going on? All I know is the point when I saw him, because he died, this was roughly 6 a.m. He died, according to the coroner's report that I questioned on, at 2:30 a.m., around there, of a heart attack in his sleep.
Or maybe you were the one who crossed over.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm up for any kind of discussion about what I ran into.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after that, I get done my shift going, oh, boy, is Roy going to show up? Man, now I know he's dead. I don't,
Right.
having the real jitters, Is he going to show? What would I say if he did? But he never did show up again.
Wow. Doug, can you top that?
No, yeah, maybe in some ways. So my first time I had my world, kind of shaken, where I knew everything wasn't quite just what you see, was at 10 years old. I was building a car model, had to use the restroom, ran to our one bathroom in our home, knocked on the door because it was closed and locked. A man's voice, who I assumed was my dad, said, "I'll be out in a minute." And the door clicked, the lock unclicked, and the door swung open. There was nobody in there. And, of course, I ran around the corner, ran downstairs, fell down the stairs because I heard my family was down there, and everybody was downstairs. And from that moment on, I went, this is kind of it was a life-changing moment. Certainly at that point got interested in the paranormal. So flash forward to even current times. Obviously I've had some run-ins with, some pretty crazy Bigfoot activity, but we were out, give you an example, we're out laying on our deck in the sun, me and Yvette, beautiful day, sunny day, and all of a sudden Yvette starts screaming. And I'm looking at her, and she's pointing, and I turn my head slow, and there's a black, unidentified object, like an orb. Daytime. This is in the middle of the daytime. And it appears to be breathing. And it's got kind of a textured skin on it, and it's changing it, from what I can see, into kind of a triangle, and then a circle, and then kind of an oval. And I reach for my camera, which was sitting on a little stand right next to me, and I reached for my phone, slowly got it on, and I'm thinking this thing's alive. I don't want to startle it. Mm-hmm. And I turned my cell phone on, and as soon as I swung my camera on, the thing darted up to the clouds, and I did get footage of it. And it, even the footage I have is amazing.
I'd love to see that.
Mm.
Well, that night, we were in the garage, and we were watching TV. I've got my garage kind of remodeled like a house. And we're out there watching TV, and there was a yellow light flashing on the wall. And I said to Yvette, why is there a tow truck in our driveway? Because the lights were coming through the opaque windows, these yellow lights. Whoa. And the lights just kept flashing, and she goes, well, open the garage door. So I opened the garage door, and there was no truck, no tow truck. So I shut the door, and within seconds after I shut the door, her two cats started just screaming like they were going to kill each other. I'd never heard these two cats scream like this. And, of course, now we're running downstairs to see what's going on with these cats, and they're just looking at us. We go back upstairs, sit down, we're talking about what just all went down, and all of a sudden we hear a whistling noise. And we hear this whistling noise, and something thuds on the roof. Loud. Now we're hearing running from left to right on the roof. And we're just, this is all happening so quick, guys, that we don't even know how to process it. And so then the running quits. And Yvette is like, open the garage door. I said, are you kidding? I'm not opening that garage door. And then everything kind of went back, nothing happened after that. The next morning, it gets weirder. The next morning, I open the garage door to investigate, look at the roof, because something really hit our roof hard. And I walk out there, and I notice there is like a white, I only can call it vomit, all over my car, which had been washed the day before, and it looked like something had eaten sawdust and digested it partially and then thrown it up all over my car. It was even embedded into my grill of my car.
Ugh.
And it was all over. And, of course, I took a lot of photos. Immediately went and got a baggie, scraped in the material into a baggie, called my friend Alan Sibuzar at AW Research Labs and said, I need this. I told him the whole story, need this stuff analyzed. I called a guy at my office to come pick it up to get it mailed off to Alan. Joe gets here, and I had set everything in this spot on my daughter's little electric ATV on the running board. And he's like, it's not here. And I said, what do you mean it's not there? I just put it there 10 minutes ago. And we never found it again. That's one of my stories.
Yeah, why does that says Mothman to me? It's some of the phenomena that occurred in the 60s in the Ohio Valley, particularly the running on the roof and that sort of thing. Just reminds me of it.
It's just, when things happen, you just expect a normal day, right? You don't want these things to happen, but they do. You see it. It forever really messes with your head. I mean, to this day, Yvette has forms, I would say, of PTSD because we used to go outside on the deck at night constantly, and now she's a little hesitant. I have to twist her arm to get outside that night because of that evening.
Well, fellas, on that note, we have a question from another listener. Not just a listener, but it's Rick Eno. How many Enos can sit on the head of a pin? Who is our one of our show guest co-hosts and our Northern California show reporter. Ben, if you would do the honors.
Yes, from the illustrious Rick writing to us. Gentlemen, there was a FOIA dropped a few weeks ago on the CIA research recovered alien technology. What's your take on that? Is it actually helpful? Also, do you think we will ever get actual disclosure or some watered-down version which will lead to nothing?
Okay, we'll start with Joel.
I think it's good. I mean, disclosure. I mean, they're making they want to put it out there like they're making an honest attempt at disclosure with the Tic Tac video and things like that. But I don't believe that we're going to see true disclosure anytime soon. That's just my opinion. But as far as the new reports they're dropping from the CIA, that was also, you can find all that stuff on the CIA website. Also, that deals with everything you'd want to know about UFOs. They're starting to release that because of Marco Rubio's legislation in the last stimulus package. They're starting to release more and more onto the website, by the way, for all your listeners, and you can read all that. But the technology, I kind of took a peek at that same FOIA that they posted, and it didn't say a ton. I mean, it said some things, but nothing groundbreaking, not yet.
Yeah,
I think we're pretty far away from an actual aha moment.
No,
that we're actually
I agree. I certainly agree with that. Okay, Doug, do you want to take a shot at that one?
Yeah, I mean, as far as disclosure goes, I really do think everything is broken up into too many compartments. Because all you're going to ever get is disclosure from one little department.
Exactly.
You're never going to get it from the main, that somebody's going to go and gather it from all these agencies. The government is just too big. One agency doesn't know what the other agency has.
Absolutely right. Yep.
So there can only be disclosure from one agency, and that's going to be redacted. And yes, it's very refreshing to finally have the government say, yes, that little bit of footage is real. Or it's authentic, it's not hoaxed. And, we know this, we know that, but it's got to be just a tiny prick of what just a prick.
I know, just to butt in here quick, I think disclosure is going to come from us before the government. I think the amateur researchers will be putting out way better information than the government ever wants to put out.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately it's going to be the man on the street. They'll blow the whistle and do the disclosure.
I couldn't agree more. We're the disclosure.
Right.
I think, it's true. Ben and I have been on a lot of panels, and this always comes up at conferences, and they'll say, I think it's just disclosure this year. And they'll get to me, and I'll say, all right, audience, show of hands. Who believes what the government says? Everybody groans. And I said, there is no the government. It's a fragmented turf battle kind of a thing between the military, different departments. Just as Joel, well, both of you have said. So yeah, I certainly agree. So thank you, Rick, for writing in. So why don't we continue with your own personal paranormal experiences? What are the most recent ones that have really moved you or caused you to kind of do double takes? We'll start with Joel.
Sure. Let's see. I saw a Bigfoot, and that was about 5 years ago. Well, I can't say I saw it dead on. I was hunting in the northern Minnesota in a pretty dense foliage, and I was camping at a reservoir where there's a big, it was October, so it was closed, and you could go in there and camp overnight. And it was a big reservoir, federal campsite, and I am just sitting there next to the campfire, really minding my own business, not even thinking about anything paranormal at all. Not even crossing my mind. I was more worried about moose hunting than I was about Bigfoot at that moment.
I'd be more worried about the moose.
Yeah, right. And the first thing that struck me it wasn't the Bigfoot itself, but the smell that I was smelling. It almost smelled like someone that hadn't showered in about 10 years with some other scents, almost like a skunk scent right along with it. That hit me right away, and it made me, even before I realized I was being watched, that kind of hit my senses first. And I started looking around, and through the trees, I could see a black mass, big, I would say about 8 feet tall, staring at me. And I could see its eye shine, though. It was close enough to the fire that I could actually see its eye shine. And this is pretty damn tall, excuse my language, this is pretty darn tall. It was, I would say, about 8-footer. And once I realized what was going on, but the second thing that hit me after the smell was just the panic. Like, you would think a guy with a high-powered rifle would not be panicking at seeing a Bigfoot. I was a baby. I was scared. I had anxiety like I had never experienced in my life. I didn't know what to do. It was almost like a scared rabbit syndrome. I ended up getting into my truck, locking all the doors, and staying there all night, clutching my rifle until my friends came to get me the next morning. Oh. And once I got in that truck, I didn't dare look, but I could hear things in my campsite being moved around. The next day come out and things are disheveled from what there were. My coolers were all ransacked. It was really a terrifying time for me anyway. And I know since I've had my sighting, others have talked to me about having that sense of fear, that sense of dread. Really, it's a super anxiety attack for me anyway. Others have talked about that. And so that's something I've been looking into very heavily. Being a radio guy and understanding sound, infrasound comes to my mind. Because it almost sounded like a blast of felt like it. Because I'd been around infrasound doing experiments, and that can give you that feeling. If you don't know what's coming, it really is effective. And
that's
my
your
latest
domain
sighting.
if you want to make a comment.
Oh, no, it's interesting because we've had discussions with Alexander Pedikov on this too, that some animals actually can produce infrasound and, essentially scare off any sort of predators. And his whole thing, which I actually tend to agree with, is, some being able to control your scent. I know that some simians are able to do that. And it's entirely possible, right? Infrasound is kind of one of those things where, it can really, really mess with your head. It's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah. Doug, what's happened to you lately?
Oh, gee, okay. The last thing that happened also happened on a beautiful, clear blue day, during the day, which, when things happen during the day, I think it has more of an effect on you because you're like, oh my God, if this is going on in the day, what's going on at night? So we were just, we live on a all electric, lake where you can only have electric boats. And so we were out fishing all day, had a great day fishing, but both gotten baked in the sun. Coming back to the dock, once again, Yvette starts kind of screaming and pointing, what is that? What is that? And of course, I'm trying to dock the boat. And I look, and there are thousands of sparkly, shiny, whitish things that are all kind of flocked together. And at first I think I'm looking at a big flock of some kind of really weird exotic bird. But of course, I can see that there's no wings. They're just kind of blobs of balls. And they're going into each other, out of each other. 10 would come out of 1. 1 would go into 10. And they're swarming around our roof, the trees, the neighbor's house. And, of course, I get my camera out and I start filming. And I'm filming from 50 to 100 feet away, all these things swirling around. And I said, Yvette, get your phone out and start filming this too. She gets her phone finally fired up and they start moving off. And eventually they disappear. And we were just stunned. I get the boat docked. We run inside in the darkest part of the house to look at the footage. And my phone won't turn on. And so I'm plug it in. Doesn't work. Won't turn on. I said, let's go to the Sprint store. We hop in the car. We go to the Sprint store. And all of a sudden, we get there and we tell the guys exactly what happened at the Sprint store. Said, you got to get this footage off. And so they go in the back room and they come out 10 minutes, 20 minutes later and they just said, your phone is a brick. They'd never even heard that term. And they said, go take it to this guy. Maybe he can get the footage off. He had the same conclusion. It's just a brick. And her footage came out fine, but they were farther away. And since we have found numerous people that have got evidence or footage exactly like ours, it's kind of a sparkly cloud of things that just kind of act like a flock of birds, but they're not birds. You can clearly see they're not birds. And there's been numerous footage taken all over the country. I don't know what it is. It's really weird. But the weird part is right after that, all of our low voltage things started burning out in our home. All the HDMI ports, for instance, on every TV burned out. Security system burned out. Just all of the low voltage transformers burned out. And this happened over a period of like 3 weeks. Everything failed. So
I take it that Yvette has blood pressure issues at this point.
It's really...
Yeah. Well, we're headed to your house, the earliest opportunity. Fellas, we're almost out of time, so I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your website, your show, where people can find out more. Joel, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, you can find out more about it, of course, is untoldradioam.com. There's all of our archives. You can listen to the latest and greatest shows. We're having a lot of fun doing it. I mean, that's one thing about the show is we really enjoy doing it. And you can find us also on iHeartRadio and anywhere you can download podcasts. There we are. And we have a lot of great guests on the horizon, a lot of cool things coming on the horizon. Look for the website to have more cameras added to it, things like that, different things you can watch. I think you guys will be really pleased. I can't have a better partner in radio than Doug, too, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. He's a great co-host and a great radio personality.
Great.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, it's a great show. Doug, how about you? Where can people find out more?
Well, yeah. Just go to the Untold Radio. I do finally have a Facebook page, so people can get a hold of me on Facebook. And I know the Untold Radio also has a Facebook, and so does Joel.
Yep.
Very good. What's your next project? Ben, did you have a question? You've been scribbling furiously.
I always scribble furiously because I come up with thoughts and then they either get answered or I figure they're not appropriate to ask. So I guess, I always like to try and ask like a sort of wrap-up question, kind of an ambiguous one. And I guess in this case, it's, as time moves forward, where do either of you see the state of paranormal research going?
Doug, you want to cover that one first?
Yeah, to me, it's going to go into a micro level. That's the direction I'm going. For instance, Bigfoot footprints, there's sweat pores in those casts, but we need to get into a micro level. We need to get into gas chromatograph, analysis of substances left behind, better DNA studies. So to me, everything's just going to go smaller.
Okay.
Interesting. Joel?
Right, Joel? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that paranormal investigation, as far as spiritual paranormal investigation, I've actually seen it take a step back to analog lately. I've had more questions from investigators about how analog works and 35 millimeter cameras. I think we're getting to that point where all the bells and whistles and lights and REM pods and stuff like that, I think people want to get to more of a simple investigation. Where, back in the older days, and Paul, you could definitely, attest to this with me, that's all we had. And man, did we get some great evidence with analog equipment. And I noticed that with a digital switchover, the evidence isn't as good. If I can, that's the appropriate way to put it, but it's not as good. I mean, at least with a 35 millimeter camera, you always had that negative to fall back on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is what I saw. Here is the negative. It's there. Where digital, anybody can manipulate a picture. I mean, really, you get a Photoshop, you get another program. It doesn't take a whole lot to manipulate that picture. And then analog audio, same thing. You have that magnetic tape that's not going to lie. It's going to hear what it's going to hear.
That's true, yeah.
And it's either there or it's not. And so I've noticed some investigators, like I said, are going backwards. And I really kind of think a hybrid approach is the way to go, embracing both digital for the convenience, but also the analog for the concrete evidence.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I remember in the good days of yore, you'd have the negative. We had a photo lab we worked with,
And you had a reel-to-reel recorder, I believe, yeah?
Yeah, we were seat of the pants. Yeah, we did. Old tape recorders, and we got reverse EVPs, things that we would hear but wouldn't record, and that sort of thing. It was a very interesting time. So I'm very glad to hear that more of a hybrid approach would be kind of in the offing. Well, fellows, we're just about out of time. What a great pleasure to have you. What a great conversation. And we'll stay in touch off the air, and thank you both very much.
Indeed.
Yeah, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hajicek. Okay, let's move on to our announcements.
Okie dokie. And I guess we'll hop right into the big one, which is Maine has lifted most COVID restrictions. So we received confirmation this week from the organizer, Tom Spitaleri, that the in-person New England Parafest will take place as planned on April 10th and 11th at the Kittery Community Center in Kittery, Maine. We plan to be there both days, but we will do a live broadcast of the show from there on Sunday at noon. Then we're scheduled to speak that afternoon at 3:15. Other speakers will include Shane Searway, Andy Kitt, Dennis Stone, Nomar Slevik, the Connecticut Paranormal Research Team, Kristen Evans, Dave McCullough, Lynn Nickerson, and Tom D'Agostino. You can check that out on Facebook. That's New England Parafest 2021.
And we're working hard on our new book, Behind the Paranormal 3, Uneasy Skies. Also contributing will be our colleagues Shane Searway, Alexander Petikoff, and Valerie LaFaso, whom you will hear more about as time goes by. She'll be on the show in a few weeks. The book will also contain the best of our interviews over the years with the greatest researchers in the UFO field, as well as some of our own experiences. Look for the book released toward the end of this year.
And you can check out our current books along with those of our other co-hosts at our show website, BehindTheParanormal.com, where you can also find out more about the show, our many cases over the years, our public appearances, and how to book us, along with our 900-plus free recorded shows from our 12-plus years on the air, including our 4.5-year run on CBS Radio, along with special shows and podcasts.
Now, we've gradually been reloading recorded shows into the archives at BehindTheParanormal.com back to 2009. We got another year to go back to 2008, and also a bunch of special shows and podcast things of that kind. So there'll be well over 1,000 hours of shows available on the site as soon as we can get them back up there after a lot of technical issues from the last few years. Past shows back to late 2009 are also available on major podcast platforms, mostly YouTube, iTunes, Apple Podcast, Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, and more. There are links to several charities we've adopted on the show, including USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, Youth Mentoring Connection in Los Angeles, Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero. We know all the people who run these charities, and the money goes where it's supposed to, and you can trust them. We trust them ourselves. So, Ben, what do we have for next week?
So, next week, that's March 14th, slowly but surely, taking our way through March, we have the long-awaited appearance of author and researcher Linda Zimmerman on the subject of how animals react to UFOs.
I can't wait to hear that. That's.
Have we ever had her? We've had her on the show before, right?
Oh, she's been on the show many times.
Okay, all right. I was like, I feel like we've had her on before.
Yeah, and point out that in June 20th, to be exact, we will have our official 900th broadcast.
Oh wow!
So yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
And that's because we used to do 2 shows a week on this station and on CBS. There were 2 separate shows.
So we cheated.
It added up. Well, I don't know if you call it that. So in any case, that should really be interesting. We're looking for ideas for that. We leave you today with an uplifting little thought from 19th century British children's author and the alliterative name Richard Henry Hengist Horne. 'Tis always morning somewhere in the world. It's kind of a nice thought.
Yeah, well, we got a few seconds left.
All right. Well, yeah, I love that name, Richard Henry Hengist Horne.
I know that. Talk about alliterations, huh?
You know how I am with alliterations. You not so much.
Indeed. And you are?
Anyway, I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno. And thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey. And we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.